Okay, so he wouldn't win any prizes for his delivery, but at least he'd said it. He'd told her. The look on her face was one of complete astonishment, and she opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand, effectively cutting her off. Now was not the time. Come on. Let's move on. We can talk when we're outside and safe. She shut her mouth and nodded. Turning his back on her, he crawled further up the tunnel. The angle was noticeably steeper now, and the breeze was stronger than before. It blew the hair back off his face, a sensation he relished, for it told him they were on the right track. Escape, evasion, and survival. That's what he was trained for, and during his operational days he'd crawled through way worse than this to stay alive. They all had. He thought grimly of Jamie, Cole, Alex, and Pat, his makeshift unit, who would be guiding the freed hostages through the thick, impenetrable forests that covered the valley to the rendezvous point, where a waiting chopper would transport them to freedom. They were a good bunch of guys. He'd served with them all at one time or another during his Special Forces career. They were effective, able, and deadly. Even though the Taliban fighters would be close on their tail, he was confident they'd get the hostages out in time. Peering ahead into the tunnel, Grant estimated they had at least 20 to 30 meters to go before they broke ground. It was doable, as long as the enemy weren't waiting for them at the other end. Grant knew from experience that things hardly ever went according to plan. This op was a classic case in point. You could prepare down to the finest detail, but inevitably something would happen to fuck it up. The enemy was an unknown force, impossible to control, and that's why you always had to ask yourself, what if? What if there were more insurgents than they'd expected? What if the hostages weren't there? What if one of them was injured? What if the helicopter couldn't make it to the emergency rendezvous point? What if? Well, good thing Grant had plenty of contingency plans. At the US Air Base at Bagram, just before the Apache helicopter had brought them out here, he'd studied drone footage of these mountains and knew they were crisscrossed with tunnels, the Taliban's favourite hiding place. He was betting on the fact that the enemy below hadn't yet realised they'd left the cave. That would give them several hours to get as far away from here as possible. It was night time, so there was no light to mark the end of the tunnel, nothing to break the engulfing darkness. The only clue he had was that the air was colder now and made his eyes water. They must be close. He rounded a curve and hit a dead end. What the? He reached out with his hand, but all he could feel was cold, hard stone. His heart dropped. No, this couldn't be. He heard Lilly scampering up behind him. Why have we stopped? How could he tell her there was nowhere to go? Another blast of icy air hit him. It seemed to be coming from above. He glanced up and realised with the start that the tunnel made a 90-degree turn upwards, and there was a hole at the top through which he could see the stars. Brilliant! They'd made it. He recalled there was a crescent moon tonight, which was perfect because it gave them enough light to see by, but wouldn't leave them too exposed. There would be plenty of shadows in which to hide. The only problem was getting up there. He gauged the distance to be about 10 foot, too high for him to reach, but together they might have a shot. We're at the end, he called to Lillian, who'd stopped behind him. There's a hole vertically above us, but it's high, and we're going to both have to squeeze in here for me to get you up there. Thank God. He heard the relief in her voice. Good. I'll get to my feet, and then you crawl as far forward as you can until you feel my legs. Then slide up next to me.